You can see through me. I said you can see the bullet through.
Yep. Your hair's just fine enough at that point.
So, our politics, and of course the city, the polis, the people of the city, that's what politics should be about. It's not, is it? It's about who's in power and how to get power and how to keep power and how to make some money. So politics and most superficial religion are unable to resolve that uniformity, that unity that comes from embracing individuality. So many political systems, religious systems want us to be uniform. You can't think differently, you can't act differently, you can't say anything outside the party line. Okay, so we've said that, relationship, connection. So when you experience the flow of love, and that's why community is so important, a community that actually is a loving community, then it dissolves our sense of disconnection. Oh, there's a real religious coming in, a real priest. So I've mentioned that already too. Principle 1, lonely. 2 is oppositional and moves us towards preference and exclusion. Principle 3 is inherently moving, dynamic, and generative. So, and even when you find out that school staff's backstabbing, hospital staff's backstabbing and jealousies and hating it when somebody else gets promotion, and staff meetings. I know at one big school I was at, staff had come in before the staff meeting, they'd be in the staff room, they'd be joking and laughing and cups of coffee being consumed and biscuits galore, and then the deputy would say, right, let's get this meeting started, and they'd start to move over towards the conference room and the whole place would go grim. Not just silent, but grim. And I thought then, well, what's good is going to come out of this? So we need to do what Jesus asked us to do, to be him. So it cuts all dualistic thinking. Now our society is formed on dualism. Again, one of these things that we don't see in the universe, but we do it. And dualism, I've got a section on that which I'm not going to use today. It's fairly long, but basically it is that pushing apart, either or. White and black, Catholic, Protestants, Sunni and Shia, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, you name it. Black and white, male and female, and always one is assumed to be greater than the other. And so you get that sin. Dualistic. So non-dual thinking, it's actually dualism, but it's hard to distinguish between duality and dualism. Actually, duality is non-dual thinking, so I just made the mistake there. So I go with dualistic thinking and non-dual thinking. And that is both and. Not either or, but both and. Unity. Bring it together. Find out what's common. What do we do with Catholic and Protestant? We disagree about one line of theology. We agree on about 97 or 98%, but they look at the one bit. They even went to killing people over it. Crazy. So, God is not a being among other beings, but the ground of being itself, which flows through all beings. I have often wondered, as in my younger days, how God kept the universe going. With 2 trillion galaxies, none fewer than 100 billion stars, and then all the individuals that might be on many of those worlds. Thought, how does God keep all of this in being? And then I thought, it doesn't have to. It is being. It is of God. It is in existence. It doesn't have to be controlled. It has, one of the things we see in the Big Bang, the flaring forth, is there were just two gases. It was a nuclear event, hydrogen, helium. There was a lot of noise, big explosion. There was a lot of heat. But basically that was it. But there was potential. And the laws of physics right from the start, particularly gravity, which brought all the gases gradually over a long time into tight balls where they lit up. We can see back this far now with the telescopes, and particularly with the WMAP, which I'll look at later. We can see back this far and see what happens. And then it burst into life, and those first suns cooked all the hydrogen and helium into all the other elements which you need for life. Then they went supernova and threw all the dust out. Guess what? Our sun is a second, and then it came together again, coalesced into great hot balls we call stars. And our sun is a very small one in a very inconspicuous galaxy. And then the clouds of dust that came together but weren't big enough to be drawn into the sun but just held there became planets. And our planet had all those chemicals that were needed for life. It's an amazing thing. Potential. Ground of being through which all being flows. Paul says to the intellectuals in Athens, this God is not far from us, but is the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Live, move, and our being. There he is up on the Areopagus, and they're paying their usual amount of attention. So, that God is unhindered dialogue, positive, inclusive, a water wheel of outpouring love that never stops. And I use that water wheel because the great theologian of Franciscans, just after St. Franciscus Bonaventure, a fountain fullness of love. So, each bucket keeps emptying and each bucket keeps refilling. It's got its drawbacks, of course, as an image, but it starts to give us an idea. Constant. What love is, it is not in stasis. It is not static. Love is in love till you give it away. And guess what God did in forming the universe and having the potential for us? Love given away. Yeah, so our sense of disconnection is an illusion. We're the ones who do that. We disconnect. Nothing can stop the flow of divine love. We cannot undo the eternal pattern, even by our worst sin. God is still going to love, because that's who God is. Yeah. There's something I was going to say, must have been very important, forgotten. So God's always winning. You see in a lot of stories and books and understandings of people that this is a great battle between God and the devil. The devil hasn't got a show. Only so far as we allow evil. So God's love will always win in the end. The only way we can go to hell is to actually choose to. And that's again what the idea that the Cappadocian fathers had. The other big idea was of purgatory. And the original meaning of purging, of purgatory, is to purge, to empty out, to drop. And their thought was that this was a place like Hades, which is not hell and not necessarily fired up, but is a spot where souls can go and have a chance to understand what love is, what God's about, what evil is about. We call, for the devil, for want of a better word, Satan, and then to choose finally. The ones who haven't already chosen to go down that path have a chance to say, well, I want to learn how to love. And that can be a very hard thing for them, but they get a chance. So that was the idea of purgatory originally. So we don't know, but it's worth seeing that these rather holy people thought of it that way. Okay. And I think I've used here too the, I think I'll come to that, so I won't say it now. The divine dance, that movement around that circle. Love does not lose, God doesn't lose. That's what it means to be God. There's one God and there is no other. But that very early, one of the earliest dances was the circle dance. And it was 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and then bending the knee to allow God to empower us again, because we're human. 3 steps forward, and then we invariably take 2 steps back. Then if we allow God in, it'll empower us to take 3 steps forward. And we're advancing slowly, 1 step at a time. So, as I said, we can't live in a static world. So the wonders of modern astrophysics we can see and get some sort of a grip on our rapidly expanding universe. And in that is a basis and an impetus for life and growth. It's also when people get frightened with what I'm saying, even though it goes right back to the beginning, and they say, oh, you're taking away our faith. But faith isn't a whole lot of stuff you believe. Faith is how you live. That's where you see somebody's faith. How do they actually relate? I relate, therefore I am. That's what your faith is. And these things, propositions, doctrines, whatever, are supposed to help. And they can help shape the way you live. But that's their role. They're not faith. And yet when we make our acts of faith, guess what we say? The stuff, which you can just discard any time you want. So we've got to be careful about faith. And as I was saying, when people sort of say, oh, you're New Age theology, you're taking away our faith. And I'm thinking, well, not really. Take a look at the universe. What is it doing? Expanding. What should we be doing? Staying still or expanding? Our understanding. So based on these things that have gone right back, we can now make our interpretations based on what we now know. And we know a heck of a lot more. As I said, it was only in the late 20th century that we had these telescopes up. We just didn't know it. So that's the Crab Nebula. And again, it goes right back. So Chinese scientists first saw this in 1054. And the nebula is one of these first stars which has used up all its fuel. All gone. And so it collapses in on itself. But what it's done while it was burning for about 4 billion years is form all these elements which are in the form of dust, and it throws that dust out into the universe. And then gravity starts to bring it back again into these stars, of which ours is one, but with the extra ingredients. So that's, it was 1,000 years ago, or first seen by them then. It may have been several thousand years before that for what we know. So take a look at spirituality. Catholic author G.K. Chesterton. Spirituality is not the church you belong to, but the cosmos inside which you live. And he was about 100 years before, 80 years before that first big telescope went up. Because the ones on Earth can't see all that far, even the 100-inch one that Hubble put up on Mount Wilson in California. It saw a lot, but not what we can see now. The spirituality is not the church you live in. The churches are supposed to help. They are not the be-all and end-all, which is what most churches and what most prelates have tried to make it. The church is it. You don't agree with what we say, you're out, or you're punished. Even when they had monasteries and cathedrals with dungeons and inquisitions and all of that stuff. They just were not Christian. Our churches do need to be Christian. So that's the Hubble. It's a light telescope, so it couldn't see through all the dust in the universe, which there's a heck of a lot. There are millions of stars being formed every day out of all that dust. But it was a great advance. Now we have the James Webb. And that is much, much more able to see through things. And before that, in between the two, we had the WMAP, the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, which used short wavelength waves to pierce the dust and to shape things by their heat. And so it's a microwave, using those microwaves to probe deep. And that went right back 13 billion years. The universe is 13.77 billion years old. So all of that stuff. So there's the, go back. There. So that little instrument, the WMAP, Wilkinson microwave, don't worry about anisotropy probe, it's about the way they measured the probe. So it's a microwave probe. So what it saw is the flaring forth itself. Then you get this shape there, which is just the gases. But what they could detect in it is a wave pattern, a pulse. There's your gravity. And it's like a tsunami. When you have a tsunami and you're in a boat, even a little boat out on the ocean, you get that bump. But underneath, you've got millions, maybe even billions of tons of water moving. And so but that's in miles deep. So when it gets down to very little, the only place for the water to go is up. And so you see just how powerful it is and how much is going on. Well, that's the sort of thing that was going on there. So that was going on during the Dark Ages, about 700,000 years. Then, as it gradually moved into the gases into these tight balls, as they got tighter and tighter, the temperature went up and up until finally they fired out into stars. And that took place about 400 million years it took. And then they kept doing that. And then we had after 4 billion years, we had these exploding stars, and the dust being thrown out, and then the second generation stars coming through. Accelerated expansion, dark energy, develops of galaxies, planets, a whole lot of stuff. That where our galaxy is a medium-sized one, it has 400 billion stars. Nearby we have the Andromeda Galaxy, which it's only about 2.5 billion, like 2.5 thousand light years away, I think 2,500 by 10 million trillion kilometres. Neighbour. And you've got the beautiful Sombrero Galaxy with 800 billion stars. So there, 100 billion is the minimum, but there's a lot with more. So we're in a raft of 9 galaxies, which tends to move as one unit, and that's in a super cluster, so we call them clusters, of 200 galaxies, the Virgo supercluster, which tends to move as a kind of mini universe, and there are quite a number of these in the universe, as you can imagine. So it's all rather complicated in a way, but very beautiful, the movement of them. But they also collect collisions of galaxies too, and you don't want to be around when that happens. So, was it mindless? You know, did it just happen by accident? Hard to imagine it could, you know, just by accident. But what did you know? The Big Bang had expanded at 1 million millionths of a second faster. We have had a universe of widely scattered dust and gas. If it had happened 1 millionth of a second slower, we'd have had a temporary expansion, then an almighty collapse as the gravity brought it all back into a huge black hole. Now that's Stephen Hawking. And this is a picture from those telescopes of a black hole. And what you see is the light being sucked into the black hole. And the red part of it is the effect of acceleration. When you see that, you know that it's white light, but it's being dragged through there at an immense rate. So that would have been the end of any potential. What would have happened then? Well, we don't know what's on the other side of black holes. But our God put all of this in motion. So it's worthwhile looking at, isn't it? So that's that Wilkinson map we saw with all these gases, and those yellowish, reddish are the pulses that are going through, doing all that consolidation. Tsunami-like, fields shaping energy into matter. So the energy of that explosion, a field brings it in together, and then you get matter. All these different atoms of various kinds. And that's not easy to understand. But Judy Canato's books, the 2 of them, they do get into it, and they're very good for explaining that. Judy Canato, C-A-N-N-A-T-O, have you heard about her? She died of cancer. She had cancer. She was to come to Indiana to give some talks, and she let the people know that she was just too ill to come. So I got the job of doing her talks for her throughout Indiana, Mizzou, and a bit in Kentucky. So we have a very, very slowly developing consciousness. And it started off with patriarchy about 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, sorry. And most of our religions are still patriarchal. Then we had matriarchy, which existed in nature. You know, elephant herds are matriarchal, so are hyena groups. But we didn't have all that many, but we did have some. Then we had humanarchy. The humans said, well, men and women, yeah, we're on top. We run the universe, we run this world, we can do whatever we want, pay no attention to what we're doing to the environment. And that led to hierarchy, where people got jobs because of their birth, or their wealth, or because they took it. Then some people started to think, well, no, we're all beings, we need to pay attention to our universe. There's a bit of a green movement, but green movement is a level of consciousness in spiral dynamics, which is where they tend to separate into groups. We're green, but this is what we believe, and we're green, this is what we believe, and we hate you because you don't believe what we do or emphasize what we do, and they do that. That's what happens with first level modes of consciousness. But the beings all beings started to get some sort of respect, and there's sometimes when we don't have minds because it will extinguish a whole group of life. but not always, and particularly when you get people like Trump who move it all back again. And so then we started to become aware of holarchy, the holon. And so we'll take a look at that. So that's growing levels of complexity. That's what holarchy sees, growing levels of complexity, but transcending, but also including, whereas hierarchy does not include. So I've got a couple of fun ones here. So the neonatal fetus, otherwise known as the fetal beetle, the baby, the rug rat, the toddler, the ankle biter, the child, who can be called a yard ape, and adolescent, Homo uncivilis. You can have the family, the kinship network, the village neighbourhood, the regional community, the state, the province, the cell, the organ, the organism, the ecosystem, the biosphere. You can't have biosphere without an ecosystem. You can't have ecosystem without organisms. And that can be put that way, expanding, 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 like the universe. So that's the sort of thing. And you can go down, right down to the Higgs boson. You can go right out to the universe through all the galaxies and groups of galaxies. And it's all, they need each other. You cannot have an atom without the proton or neutron or electron. You just don't exist. So you don't say, you can say the atom is more complex, but it's not more important than the bits that made it up. So that's another one I put in there. And in America I put this: bacteria to bee to bat to bird to buffalo to baseball player, because you had the Babe Ruth, who was a Homo uncivilis, even in his older age. A bit like Teddy Whitten, AFL football, magnificent footballer. He was a bit uncivil. We're going to stick it right at him, stick it right at him. Shouted on national TV. Yeah. Okay, so though holarchy, holons are the way we do it. So there's a gas bubble. Now all of those blue dots are new stars. All of them are new stars. The red ones are old. And this gas bubble is going to give rise to more. That's only several hundred light years across. So, the question, who or what holds us in our life? If we are beings and God is being and God is love. And so Denis Levertov wrote a poem about this, and her sister was someone who said, oh, God always holds us. God has loving arms. And she had a bit of a depression. I gasped God's garment in the void, but my hands slipped on the rich silk of it. The everlasting arms my sister loved to remember must have upheld my leaden weight from falling, even so. Although I claw at empty air and feel nothing, no embrace, I have not plummeted. Presence of God. Okay, I talked about this a bit. So the observable universe, this is a diagram. It looks as if we're standing outside. You can't stand outside the universe. There's nothing outside the universe. No time, no space. So you can't even go to the restaurant at the end of the universe. So there's the Virgo supercluster, that dot, and that's 200 galaxies. So that's 200 by at least 1 billion stars, and that's a dot. This is 1 billion light years, that thing there, which is 1 billion by 10 million, 10 million by 1 billion by 10 trillion kilometres. Heck of a long way. Just that. So this is what can be seen as looking out from our telescopes as just a part of the universe. It goes this way, it goes that way, it goes that way, all the way around. It's when we think, well, we can understand God completely, well, and that diagram helps us to say, don't kid yourself. But that's the big picture. And of course, Jesus was the little picture. Something that John said, we can touch, we could hear, we could be with, we could love. And that was such a gift. Okay, so in our universe, it's actually quite dark because all of the stars, all of those stars you see, there's only 0.4 of 1% of the galaxy. The gases, the intergalactic gas, like that dirty great big bubble I showed you, is 3.6% of it. There's 23% dark matter. We know it's there because when they're looking through these telescopes, they can see light being diverted, and they can't see anything there. But when it's diverted, that's that gravity attraction, moving it. And then 73% dark energy. They're starting now, the scientists, the astrophysicists have started to realise that they can't understand everything. It's not possible. So that's a big step for scientists. Huge step for scientists. But then they're starting to look at what dark energy could possibly be, what dark matter could possibly be. And they're not just using scientific methods, observation, they're also using the rest, the sense of feeling, Einstein, didn't discover E equals mc squared. He didn't come to a true formula. So they're now starting to investigate there as well, which will probably be good for them too, in terms of, and we go right back to Isaiah 55. That is one of the great chapters of the whole Bible. There's so much in that chapter. And this part of it, verses 8 and 9, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So that's the other arm of our Milky Way. The light there is because there's a great concentration of stars in that. That's just one of the arms. And this was taken from many, many places. I think 300 on Earth over a period of several days from all of these cameras, and then put together as the one image. So that's what it looks like from Earth. So we're in another arm, which we can't see there. So I've talked about that. So it was 2,000 galaxies, 100 billion stars at least. So that's one or two more than you'd imagine. So 9 in the local cluster. There's the Andromeda. That's 1 trillion stars. And you see that they tend to be in the one plane. But every blue one is a new one. All these others are clusters of stars, huge cluster of stars there, but they're all millions of light years away from each other. And you can see the dust from which the new ones are being formed. Romans 20, ever since God created the world, God's everlasting power and deity, however invisible, have been there for the mind to see in the things God has made. Again, not New Age. Paul got it. This is the Japanese satellite that took these photos over the top of the moon as it came around. That's what we have. That's what we're so busy destroying. Thomas, a mistake in our understanding of creation will necessarily cause mistake in our understanding of God. 800 years ago. Okay. Now I've talked a bit about the Christ, so I'm not going to go back through that. We need to move right along. But we're in Lent, so I thought I'd mention this. Mark 1:15 is important. Repent, which means change your thinking. We're an addictive society, and one of our greatest addictions is to our way of thinking. Change your mind, change your heart. Allow the feelings in the gut that happen when you try to do that and say, right, okay, I'm feeling it, but I need to do it. And the good news, of course, is the love of Jesus, love of God, which is manifest most obviously to us in the life of Jesus. But we also had the original, which in the Latin, memone homo pulvis est et in pulvum revetorum. Remember, human, that you are dust, and unto dust you will return. And how is that taught to us as the dust? Dirt. You're a worm and no man or woman. You're not worth anything. You're down. You're dirty. But what if we take that dust as the dust of the universe? You are cosmic. So the Tarantula Nebula is one of, so this is one of those stars that has collapsed and thrown out all the dust. It's one of the great 364 light years across. It's one of the great birthing places of stars. So you can see this here, all of these are brand new stars. The red ones out there further are older, but you can see the dust. There's a finger of dust up there being drawn up by this, and that'll be the first to become another new star. So this is actually a, what do you call it in the hospitals where all the babies are? The
nursery.
Yeah, it's a nursery for stars. Yeah.
Is that an actual photograph taken? Is that an actual...
That's a photo taken from James Webb. Yeah.
Okay, so can I ask a question, because it's come up in my mind? Okay, so when the dust coalesces and forms a new star, where does the energy for the star come from? Because suddenly a new star has to have energy.
It's explosion, heat. Yeah, it comes, it's an almighty explosion which throws all of that dust and heat out.
Then
Yeah,
the dust comes back together to,
Yeah.
to form a new star.
yeah, because it is so damn hot when it's thrown out.
Okay.
And so bring it back into a tight ball, whoosh,
Okay.
that's how the first ones happened. Yep. So each dying star you had supernova comes dust rich in carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, molybdenum, calcium, magnesium, tungsten, copper, vanadium, phosphorus, sulfur, osmium, gallium, rhodium, silver, titanium, palladium, germanium, cadmium, and a lot more. I've been everywhere, man, across the desert sand, man. Yeah, so it made all of those, and that you got the wherewithal for life. This is our God in action. All that potential. Still working through the universe. Still potential. Those stars might have planets. They might eventually have living creatures. They might even have sentient creatures. And Matthew 6, that's the second chapter of the Sermon on the Mount. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
So that's the great paradox of life again. The universe seems to be very violent, and we are supposed to be loving. So at the macro level, things are very violent, explosions, collapses, whatever. But then at the micro level, we're supposed to learn how to love.
Yep.
The other extreme.
Yep.
Anyway, just came to this.
Well, most of the universe, of course, gets along very well. But it is a perhaps again a metaphor for us to pay attention to. You know, we have wars, we have violence, and in the midst of it, we are supposed to be at peace. Yeah, it's all there for us to see. Yeah. Yes. Newe Tseviana Kaikana Dwashmaya Alfaha. He said in the Our Father, your will be done on earth, Baha, as in heaven. Okay, one of the moons of Saturn. So that Our Father who's in heaven, Abundavashmaya, it's not just who is in heaven, who is in space where you clear a space to be with him. This Ash is a source of energy, a turning point from which energy and love flows. And the Maya comes from the original prayer of the Jews of God is one, the Shema. So you see the Bashma, yeah. And then that ending extends it to the whole of creation. So it's in the language because there are layers of meaning in the Aramaic. And so you have to walk around it and take a look from different perspectives to what he's saying. But even then, Abun is a diminutive, it's dad. And we can translate that a couple of ways. I've got 4. O thou, the one from whom breath enters being in all radiant forms. So we just say our Father's in heaven. But in the original, that is one of the possible meanings. And another one, O parent of the universe, from your deep interior comes the next wave of shining life. The waves of the gravity, which brings forth the next generation stars, shining life. Jesus didn't know this. There's one of those groups of 5 galaxies, and they've had a bit of a crash, but they're again forming from all the dust. See all the blue? New stars. O fruitful, nurturing life giver, your sound rings everywhere throughout the cosmos. The Word of God, the sound. Father, Mother, who births unity. You vibrate life into form in each new instant. We're known before we're born. It says that at least 18 times in the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures. God knows us before we're born. Maybe your little cherubs flying around or something, I don't know, but we are known. And then God vibrates that life into form, new baby. And there's a heck of a lot of them. So possible meanings. Here's the Whirlpool galaxy. And we think, well, that's spinning. It ain't. What's happening is the gravity is drawing those lines together, and that's how they look as if they're spinning. The dynamics are impossible for that. It's that wave passing through and igniting togetherness, attraction. Causes those clouds of gas to implode and atoms rush together and form stars. And we've talked about that, and we can see the effects now through these telescopes. And each galaxy is like a living cell. Now that's when I talked about potential. The galaxy is doing this, why God doesn't need to control everything every single moment, and why stuff does its own thing, like galaxies bashing into each other. The galaxy has the energy, it's doing it itself. Like our, when we look at our biology, what happens? If you go back to your David Attenborough films and just look at all the things that are done. What fascinated me most in one was from a Robert Ardrey book was when one of the first to look at this, they found a flower formed entirely of bugs. So the bugs, to avoid predators, formed this flower. And some of the bugs were white, some of the bugs had red-tipped, rose-coloured tipped wings, ranging from light rose to red, and then some of them were red. And they formed themselves into white, and then to rose-tipped petals, and then into red petals around the outside. Amazing. That flower does not exist in nature. And that's something. and our world is full of this kind of thing. So the potential is self-developing, because that's what God does, and even with us, does not interfere with us unless we respond to God's presence, which is there, which we know is there, but when we ask God to be present with us. Okay. I think I'll stop there. And we can have another break. 10 minutes, please, and then we'll